this is Mike Dilt with the Relax Back UK show on UK Health Radio, your global real feel-good radio station. On the Relax Back UK show, we explore all kinds of health topics, so keep listening and enjoy the ride. Hi, and thank you for joining me, Mike Dilk, on the Relax Back UK show this week. Great guests again, and we start off with Clifton Flack of CiiTECH, and he's from the world of medical cannabis and CBD.
And we were looking at, can CBD help with asthma and COPD, other respiratory illnesses? Because, again, CBD being anti-inflammatory.
We look at some of the things that CBD products can help with, then onto something that half the population is pretty much completely ignorant about, and quite a lot of the other half needs to know a bit more.
The side effects of that are similar to the ones in puberty, but much more exaggerated.
The subject is the menopause, and my guest is Deborah Forsyth, who helps women during this time. So please stay tuned for a great show. Thank you. Flack is with the company CiiTECH, and he's in the world of medical cannabis and CBD cannabis products. So my first question to him was really, how are you involved in this, and what do you get up to?
Interesting question, thank you. So we are specifically in the CBD side of the medical cannabis world. I guess the key difference is we sell CBD, or we market CBD as a food supplement, which means very much the same way that you'd market vitamin C and echinacea, with no medical claims, and it's a free consumer choice. Customers can choose what to buy, how often to buy it, and how to use it.
Okay, so cannabis.
Sorry,
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say medical cannabis tends to be prescribed by a doctor, where there's less consumer choice, and there's also the THC element where there's that risk of psychoactive effects. So that's all right. So
we're talking about different chemical substances, are we? In like CBD and medical cannabis. We're talking about it. They both derive from the same plant. One is psychoactive, one is not. I guess is the core difference. Yeah. Okay.
One might be scarier to use for some people because of the psychoactive, but CBD is non-psychoactive, perfectly safe to use, won't get you high, and it's a nice food supplement.
All right. So, well, we are living in troubled times, and lots of people do feel sort of concerned or anxious. And some of your products or CBD products can help with anxiety. Is that right?
So there has been lots of research that's been done and still ongoing around the world of CBD as a potential anti-anxiety. And I can say over 30% of our customers report anxiety problems or insomnia or anxiety-induced insomnia, these kind of health concerns, and this is what they report, and they report to us that the CBD helps support those problems, helps remedy those problems.
Right. So does anyone know kind of how it works? What is actually happening? People take it, people are anxious.
Sure. There's two sides. There's the fact that CBD is an anti-inflammatory, and depending on the root cause of any kind of anxiety or mental health issue, there can be inflammation issues. But also it's an anti-anxiolytic, which is anti-anxiety. There's still lots of research to be done.
Yeah.
As I say, this is not it's not marketed as a medicine. So there's research to be done. Much of what we know and much of how we market it is based on the anecdotal evidence and the knowledge that's in the marketplace. Unfortunately, CBD being a safe product, you cannot overdose. There's no evidence of any kind of risk of overdose. There's the biggest risk of CBD is spending too much money and it not working. That's, I guess, the single biggest risk for consumers.
Yeah, well, I mean, that can be quite a risk. So, I mean, I've heard anecdotally of people using CBD products to reduce anxiety and them saying it works. So that's essentially what you're saying. The proof at the moment is somewhat anecdotal, although there's loads of research going on. You can't actually point to a peer-reviewed published paper saying this helps for anxiety.
Correct. Lots of anecdotal evidence, lots of very, very clever people in universities and hospitals that have done research or done the complementary studies and they believe it. And I would say I guess the most important evidence that I can bring to the table is customers and repeat business. As I say, over 30% of our customers are our customers because they have some of these mental health or anxiety problems. And they've been our customers for up to 4 years, some of them. So the fact this is not something that's prescribed, this is very much customers choose. They can buy or not buy. They can buy a small amount or large amounts. So if it didn't work, they'd stop buying. I think that's pretty.
Spend your money on something else. Absolutely.
Well, exactly.
I do know that some sports people use it. In fact, a little while ago, I interviewed George Cruz. Now he's a rugby player for England, and he's used it. And in fact, he started a company selling it. I think it's called 4-5 CBD. Did I get the name of the company right? I'm not sure. It might be 3-4. I don't know. I can't remember.
Something like that.
Apologies, George, if I got the name of your company wrong. But anyway, the fact is, he swears by it for playing rugby, and I think the reason he took it is because it sort of helped him recover. Because playing rugby, you get kind of pretty mashed around, especially if you're playing for England at a very high level. And I think talking to him, he found that it helped him recover such that he can get out and go through the whole process again. Why you would want to do that to yourself is beyond me. But anyway, that's so.
I think that you raised an interesting point. But actually, funnily enough, we work with Ben Franks, who is an ex-New Zealand All Black, World Cup winner, and he came to us. He actually called me up about 3 years ago. And he'd been using CBD for about a year and was doing some research and discovered Provocan, which is our new, it was then our new brand, and was amazed by the product and the research that we've been doing as a company behind that. What blew me away, the conversation with him, was this big rugby player, was I was expecting him to tell me he's using it for pain or for recovery or something, but he's using it for sleep. And subsequently, he introduced me to James Haskell, also ex-England rugby captain. And he also told me he's been using CBD for sleep, which kind of was a bit weird for me. But as I understood it, similar to what you said, these guys, professional rugby players, they get beaten up every single day. Whether it be in a game, on a training pitch, they get beaten up every single day. And when you're in pain, when you're bruised, it's difficult to sleep. Now, they believed they were not taking CBD for that pain. They were taking it for the sleep. And it did help. It does help sleep. But then, as I said before, arguably, because CBD is a known anti-inflammatory, it could very well be that the reason it's helping their sleep is actually helping with the pain, or the root cause of the pain, which is they're bruised a lot. But again, like I said before, there is a lack of clinical data on all of these issues. We do rely on anecdotal evidence, but that's that's very similar to the whole food supplement market. Everything from vitamin C to echinacea and ginseng, there's a severe lack of clinical data. There's lots and lots of anecdotal evidence, and that's what the market relies upon, and that's what we rely upon.
Well, in the supplement industry, there is some data that it's known that actually taking too much of some particular vitamins is not a good plan. But you've said it's impossible to overdose on CBD oil. Is that anecdotal or is that proven?
There is. Well, I think you or your listeners could do the fact checking. There's not been a single death reported in the world ever where the cause is cannabis or any cannabis derivative products.
Right. Okay.
What I will say on the flip side, because there are side effects. There's side effects with everything in the world, especially when you're using something new. There's a study that was done in the UK by a company called GW Pharma, a big pharmaceutical company, and they have been involved in a clinical study for the best part of 10 years to look at CBD for epilepsy in children, actually. And one of the side effects that they discovered is that in very, very high dose, CBD can suppress the appetite. And that I found very interesting. I'm not sure what the other repercussions around that might be, but again, lots of research to be done. But we might find in the future, people using CBD for weight management I think that in itself would be an amazing discovery.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask you a bit more about some other things that people use CBD for. I looked on your website and there's a mention of asthma. Have people used it to help with asthma? How? Any thoughts there?
Well, I'm glad you found it. We funded that study at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem about 3 years ago. And we invested in the study with Professor Meshulam, who's actually one of these world-renowned cannabis scientists. And we were looking at, yes, can CBD help with asthma and COPD, other respiratory illnesses? Because, again, CBD being anti-inflammatory, and we know, and I know personally, I suffer from asthma myself, and asthma is inflammation of the airways in large parts. So we got some amazing results with that. And simple answer is yes, it can do. But like many things, it comes down to what's the correct dose and what's the correct delivery mechanism.
Right.
Because in this instance, with asthma, the ideal would be to inhale, because you need to get it into those lungs, into those respiratory tracts. So inhaling CBD would be ideal if you're looking to try and treat asthma. But obviously, you've got the flip side, that the worst thing you want to do when you've got any kind of asthma is to start inhaling or smoking anything. So there's work to be done. There's very exciting potential there.
Right. Something that you've mentioned a couple of times, anti-inflammatory. Now, I know that's really because there's lots of anti-inflammatory drugs, so they must be useful for lots of things. And in fact, I often hear it in relation to arthritis. So could potentially be CBD oil or CBD products be useful for arthritis? And also, when you talk about anti-inflammatory, what does that actually mean? And does it mean, because you've got to make the right thing smaller, haven't you? I would have thought so. As it were.
So yeah, you're right. It comes down to in most cases, delivery mechanism. And again, I always use the example of the comparison, right or wrong, of Nurofen, because Nurofen is the anti-inflammatory, it's the ibuprofen.
Yeah.
And I remember when Nurofen hit the market, I think the early 80s, and Nurofen went from nothing to almost owning the pain relief market. And it was only in the last few years that I've begun to understand why that is. And it's simply because we know there's loads of science out there that something like 95% of all human disease either begins with or presents as inflammation. Even cancer is I believe, it's the inflammation of the enzymes in the cell which causes a mutation. So our entire being is about inflammation or fighting inflammation. So if you look at it from a specific pain point, excuse the pun, but a pain point, then yes, you're right. You need to find that right point to make smaller, which is why you see that again, using the example of Nurofen, it's not just pills you pop, but they've got topical creams and gels. So if it's a muscle inflammation, then you can massage that ibuprofen direct into that body part. And it's very much the same thing with CBD. One of our biggest sellers is CBD balm. Lots of our professional athletes and amateur athlete customers, they use it for exactly that. Pre and post exercise, they'll massage that balm into their muscles, and either it protects or it helps with the recovery. But yes, anti-inflammatory. This is something that's really powerful. Whenever we speak to doctors or pharmacists who are learning what this is about, as soon as we say to them anti-inflammatory, you see the light bulb blink, and they understand it.
And
consumers love it.
Is there a way of introducing CBD products into the body that it might help with arthritis? Have you heard of that?
I can tell you that amongst many, my mother has been using CBD balm on her wrists, on her arthritic wrists, for 4 years.
Okay.
And she swears by it. Look, this is no. CBD is not a treatment, it's not a cure, for sure not. And as a food supplement, even we can't even make any claims close to any kind of medical thing. But as a supportive product, I guess, or as an adjunct therapy, for sure. So applying CBD to those arthritic joints daily, twice daily, can certainly bring relief. Is it going to cure arthritis? I quite clearly no. Or if it can, there's plenty more research to be done first. But certainly as a daily therapy, then it's very, very useful. Very, very useful.
And like you say, the worst that can happen is that it won't work and you'll have spent some money.
The worst that can happen is that, yes, it won't work. And to be honest, actually, I speak to my customer service guys every day. And we're always tracking what our customers are feeding back to us. And what we see is that over 60% of the time that our customers say it's not working or it doesn't work for me, it's simply they're using it wrong. And that could be not taking enough, like the dose is too small, or they're trying to treat or trying to solve a muscle problem with a sublingual oil. Well, clearly use the right delivery mechanism for what you're trying to help. And yes, that's the biggest risk. There's very few side effects, very limited side effects, no significant risks to anyone. I mean, to be honest, one of the biggest risks, I guess, and this is not uncommon, is choosing the wrong brands, choosing the wrong products, because we're coming out of this now. This has been a highly unregulated market. It's still very nascent. It's still young. We don't have any of the long-established consumer brands that have come into the market yet. So customers, they're having to navigate their way around a very confusing product with brands they don't recognize.
Sure.
So there's a lot of learning still to be done. So I guess that one of the risks is buying a bottle of CBD that actually has no CBD in there because they've been ripped off or scammed. That's also a risk. But again, the UK is beginning to lead the way in regulating this product. And March 31st, the FSA will be enforcing novel food classification. So every product on the shelf will have to have been registered. And to register is that requirement to have gone through significant toxicology and stability testing to prove that product is safe and marketable.
So this sounds like good news for the consumer, certainly. Now, if people are listening to this and thinking, all right, so a lot of this is sort of proven anecdotally, but not by peer-reviewed real studies, but I'd still like to give it a go because frankly, my arthritis is hurting and I want to try. Where can people go get more information? Have you got a website that's useful? What's the deal there?
Sure. So people can head over to our website. If you search in Google CiiTECH, CiiTECH, then that's our corporate website. We've got lots of information about all the science that we've been involved in and that other companies are involved in. And there's links to our products and some of the very exciting, innovative products that we've been working on. But I always recommend to people, go do the research, go to Google, go to YouTube, go to the groups, go find out the right product that you should use, and then go and seek a brand that you can trust. And that's the biggest challenge, because people should not be choosing based on the cheapest. They need to be choosing based on a company that they trust that's producing that product. I'm very biased. I think our company is very trustworthy, but I advise your listeners to do the research. But for sure, search CiiTECH, CiiTECH. Come and see what we've been up to and why we think that our products are the best.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Look, Clifton, thank you very much indeed for chatting. So please do remember, if you're in pain, back pain, or you're worried about your posture, do have a look at my website, relaxbackuk.com. In particular, the back app chair can help when you're working at your desk and it's just causing you grief, causing you a lot of pain. It does help thousands of people, many of them actually working in their home offices now. It ensures a good posture and enables you to have a low level core workout while you're sitting at your desk. It's helped thousands of people. The website again is relaxbackuk.com, so please do have a look. We will shortly hear from Deborah Forsyth about some of the problems with the menopause and what women can do, and also what men can do to help their partners. Is Deborah Forsyth, and she advises women on the menopause. So hot flushes, anxiety, other problems. I asked her, first off, is it just a bad design?
Well, let me just take it back a little bit, Mike, because actually it's a perfect design. What I try to tell people is think about menopause as puberty in reverse. Okay, so puberty has a purpose. Puberty brings us to adulthood. You know, for guys, you get hair in your men's places, and we get hair in our female places, and we get boobs and we get hips. And then we get periods to prepare us to carry and give birth to children. So menopause is just that body's recognition that that job is done, and that we're running out of the eggs that would provide us with the opportunity of getting pregnant. And with that comes, like puberty, an enormous change in our hormones. So instead of them growing up to give us that huge fertility, they start withdrawing to get us ready to transition into the next phase, which is postmenopause. The side effects of that are similar to the ones in puberty, but much more exaggerated. So as progesterone and estrogen drop, we start getting hot flushes, night sweats, insomnia, chronic fatigue, irritability, etc., etc., etc. I mean, there are about 30 symptoms of menopause, none of which any two women will ever experience at the same time. So I think the problem a lot of women have with menopause is actually they're not prepared. I mean, puberty, kids go to school, they get full education, sex education, what's going to happen. They talk to each other a lot, you know, have you come on, have you not come on? But when it comes to menopause, we're in a really busy state of affairs where we generally are a sort of sandwich generation. We've got kids we're looking after, maybe elderly parents. And these days, women are working as hard as men. And unfortunately, there still is a huge stigma around menopause, because not only does it actually say, well, actually, you're not going to be fertile anymore, but it's, oh my God, you're getting old. That's what used to be the thought. And if you're old, you're worthless. You can't cope with your work. And you might as well just go sit in your rocking chair till you die. So,
right. Well, I mean, it's certainly our experience in this household is it is a big deal, and there's a lot happening. So actually, in that respect, because we're going through COVID, and kind of sometimes it feels like the whole world is on edge slightly. Is it kind of worse for people? You know, certainly the feelings of anxiety and this kind of stuff. Is that heightened for people that are going through this just now?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. The reason for that is we are all experiencing higher levels of cortisol. And I'm sure you know cortisol is the fight and flight hormone that we all have. And for the last year, we've been fed news that says, go inside, don't do this, hide away, wear a mask, be protected, compounded with women who would normally go out to work, maybe not have children at home. They're trying to homeschool and look after the family with all the restrictions into menopause. Not only are they experiencing the menopause symptoms, but they're exaggerated by something called adrenal fatigue. And the adrenal organs are the ones that pump out huge amounts of cortisol. Cortisol, being a hormone, has a massive effect on progesterone and estrogen. So most menopausal women are finding that their symptoms are made worse times 10.
Right. Okay.
Made worse times 10. And it's really difficult because all of the symptoms become so much worse. Added to the fact that most of us have eaten and drunk too much for a long time because what else are we going to do? So you're adding that extra fat level of tissue. And in menopause, when you have more fat than your body needs, it also produces extra hormones that are going to be made worse by the extra cortisol that's pumping around our bodies.
You mentioned drinking there. Does drinking alcohol, presumably, does that heighten symptoms?
Yes, it does. Well, simply in simple terms, it's sugar. So most of us have more than one glass of sugar at night. We're having 2 or 3, or maybe a bottle of gin and tonic as well, on top of the extra food that we're eating, because what else are we going to do in the evening? You know, you watch television, you can't get out, especially in the winter. So the extra sugar puts pressure then on the insulin levels. So we've got higher insulin levels. We know that higher insulin levels, along with the cortisol, will interfere more and disrupt the hormonal changes that are already occurring.
Okay.
So everything that any menopausal woman has had in the last year is exponentially worse than it would have been had we not. And
you mentioned at the start of the chat, you mentioned 30 symptoms.
Yes.
So I've kind of come across two. We come across two. Mention some of the others.
Okay, what two are you familiar with?
Well, so hot flushes and anxiety.
Okay. So you've got hot flushes, hot sweats at night. Have you managed to stay in bed with your wife throughout this? Well, I mean, does she get too hot? Because a lot of women at night will wake up drenched to the point where they have to get up, kick their husband out of bed, strip the beds, change their clothes, have a shower, and get back in.
Yeah. So yes, absolutely, she did suffer from that. But actually, a lot of the symptoms have been controlled by something else that I want to ask you about after you mentioned some more of the symptoms. And that's patches. So patches have been like a godsend to us.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay.
We'll definitely come on to those, but talk about some of the other symptoms.
Well, obviously then if you have a disrupted night's sleep, you wake up exhausted.
Yeah.
And the first thing that most people do in the morning when they wake up exhausted is have the first cup of coffee. Right. We're all guilty of that, potentially. But unfortunately, coffee first thing in the morning on an empty stomach is going to disrupt your hormones even more. So the first thing we're doing in the morning is actually not setting us up for a great day hormonally. It's disrupting it. So we're
lucky there, because my wife has banned caffeine because of my high blood pressure. So she thought she was doing me a favor, but she's doing herself a favor as well.
Absolutely. Completely. Yeah. Well done, her. 10 out of 10 for that one.
Well, I'll tell her that.
Okay. So then you can get chronic fatigue during the day, because if you haven't slept properly, you don't function well. You'll get mood swings, irritability, depression. And we all know if you don't sleep well, you crave carbohydrates and sweet stuff. So, come 11 o'clock in the morning, you're thinking, I am going to eat a monster. Or you grab the sandwich or a biscuit or sweets or cookies or whatever we have. And it is part of the menopause. That craving for the extra carbohydrates is actually part of the menopause, but exacerbated, as we said. So our eating habits become disrupted. For a lot of women, they can have breast pain, joint pain. They can have problems with mobility. So their flexibility when they were exercising can change significantly when they're menopausal and before they were premenopausal. Hair loss is massive. And again, that's associated with low thyroid that very often comes with menopause, and also stress. Men can get that as well, back patches. And for women, that is, although it's not physical, emotionally, it is destructive, because for hair, for women, it's one of those pride things. We preen it, we wash it, we groom it, we color it. When you see patches of it coming out, you think, oh my God, this is dreadful. I'm really getting old. So emotionally, that's really quite crippling for them. We grow hair in places we didn't have hair before. Due to the drop in testosterone, we find that very often you get little spikes of hair on your face. You've often jokes everywhere about, oh, that old woman's got a mustache. The bearded lady from the zoo, probably, without knowing it, was a postmenopausal woman with no testosterone in those days. So those sort of things go on a bit. Vaginal dryness becomes a huge problem for a lot of people. Urinary incontinence, because of the weakness and the thinning of the anatomical area there. Weight gain. You talk to everybody mostly, and what their biggest problem is weight gain, especially around that middle section. So that decreased sex drive, acne can be a big problem for menopausal women as well, even though they had no spots when they were much younger, and headaches. Some people have shocking headaches. So those are the top 22 symptoms that most people...
It sounds like we got off quite lightly, actually.
Yes,
actually, one of those you mentioned that I recognise, the headaches. So my wife has often had migraine headaches, and I think this brought it on a little bit more.
Yes.
But even so, and I mentioned these patches earlier.
Yes.
When we discovered those, I've got to say they were a bit of a godsend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think every woman should actually investigate what options they have to help them with their menopausal symptoms. And today we have so many options. We've got patches, we've got creams, we've got pills, we've got bioidentical hormones. Some people choose to go down the naturopathic route with herbs and drinks that can be very, very helpful. And a lot of it, truthfully, is mindset and lifestyle, which generally, in my experience, in the last 10 years, has been appalling in the run-up to menopause. I call it the Russian woman syndrome, because when have you not seen a younger woman with kids sitting at the car at the traffic lights with their phone in her hand, checking the emails on the way to school? And she'd probably been up for 2 hours doing her emails, making the kids lunch, getting them to school, doing her work, coming home, doing the same thing, trying to keep up because she can't be seen to underperform, and no time for herself whatsoever, not taking time to eat properly or exercise properly, going to bed still with the phone in her hand to disrupt her sleep, waking up in the middle of the night and checking the emails. So that comes under a syndrome of, again, adrenal fatigue. So when you crash into menopause with that level of cortisol, it's like hitting a car into a brick wall, because they have ignored themselves that run up. And again, it's lack of education and information.
Yeah. So this might be a good point to ask the question: what can us men do, us partners? Because I've got to say, when my wife is comfortable and happy, my life is a lot better. So there's a bit of selfishness in this question, but what should we be doing?
I love the fact that you're asking this question. Amazing. So first of all, open the conversation with your wife, saying, I'm a little bit confused, or whatever it happens to be. I don't understand what's happening to you. You're the woman I love, blah, 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 but you're changing. And that should give them the opportunity to say, I hate you because I'm sweating and I can't think about it. But seriously, I think we're living in years where education for menopause for men should be as important as for women, so that you know what to look out for. So if she's not wanting to have sex and turns the other way, it's not that she doesn't love you. It's because anatomically she's in pain. Because when the vagina dries up, intercourse is painful. And that's embarrassing for a woman if she hasn't talked about it before, to say something that's so important in our relationship doesn't work anymore. The hot sweats, when you see her standing 1 minute and she's fine, or you see them cardigans off, cardigans on, cardigans off, and then she bats your head off, then you would know that this transition has started, and these are some of the symptoms that would surround it. So my answer in the short term is talk about it together before it happens. Try and find as much information as you can, or do a course, a menopause for men course, so that you understand it, and also menopause for man.
Do such things exist?
What happened to you? Yes. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I run courses for men for the very reason of actually saying this is what is going to happen to your wife between the ages of, these days, anything from about 45 to 55 or longer. It's transformational for them because they just don't know, and it makes sense. So if you know that these things are happening and you know that she's behaving this way, it's not a breakdown in your relationship. It's just that her body is changing either slowly or rapidly, and she does feel out of control. I mean, commonly women will say, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't recognize myself. My hair has got thinner. My body has got fatter. I've lost my shape. I sweat all the time. I run up and down the stairs 10 times to find stuff and forget every time what I've gone up for.
Right.
I pee myself when I laugh or cough. It's embarrassing, and they are still not fully comfortable with discussing it. But with a kind approach in a relationship, it makes it much more easy a transition for both of you.
It does sound like, generally speaking, we've kind of got off fairly lightly, but it has been a bit of a roller coaster ride to some extent. Let me ask you about something related, if it even exists, because you hear this phrase, the male menopause.
Yes.
Is that a thing? What happens?
Well,
so I'm the same age as my wife. I'm 54, and I haven't noticed anything yet. Should I be waiting?
Well, I think for men, it's not always as obvious as women, but obviously your main hormone is testosterone, and that will decline over a period of time. So one question I'd say to you, I've never met you before, but you have some receding hair.
Do I? I know you can see me. Yes, I know. I'll admit it. It's there. It's happening.
Okay. So when did that start for you?
Oh, this has been going on for years.
Okay.
It's really started in the last 8-10 years or so.
Okay, so I would be so bold as to suggest, without noticing anything other than your hair loss, that would be a sign of your dropping of testosterone.
Right.
Because we know for men, testosterone is your number one hormone. It's hugely connected with hair loss. So the receding for men is the same as women. So when
some men start receding kind of, like in their 20s, really early.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, so some people have generic or familiar tendencies to have bald patterns. The ones that start at the back of the head tend to be familiar. The ones at the front tend to be hormonal. But what we're also seeing a lot of these days is younger men with very low testosterone levels. Now, the theory behind that is the foodstuffs that we eat are so genetically modified. A lot of them have estrogen hormones within them. So because we're drinking a lot of milk and eating a lot of beef that potentially will have been fed hormones to make them bigger and fatter, and antibiotics to make them bigger and fatter, and then packed in plastics that will also have what we call exogenous hormones, we're finding a lot of men younger, even in their mid-20s to mid-30s, have a significantly lower testosterone level due to lifestyle influences.
Is that backed up by real peer-reviewed research, or is that just some kind of weird theory?
It's not something I made up this morning. It's actually backed up. It's becoming a thing.
Scary.
It is very scary, but again, commonly what we are seeing with more middle-aged men walking around, female attributes. We're seeing a lot more men in their mid to late 50s and 60s with more predominant male breast type tissue.
Okay. Right.
And a more predominant hip shape that sits just above their trousers, not necessarily the belly bit, but these are things that we're actually seeing. And scientifically, what we're seeing is that there's a higher incidence of infertility in men because of the lowness of their testosterone levels.
Right.
Robbie Williams is a very famous guy who had his testosterone tested in his late 30s because he found he was almost suffering from symptoms of menopause. He was irritable, he was angry.
This is Robbie Williams, the pop star, is it?
And he had his hormones tested and found that his hormone level was that of an 80-year-old man before he was 40.
Blimey.
So it does exist. And it's something that I think more men should be aware of. What I always say to people that I talk to, think what the food you're eating has eaten. Okay, because if you know anything about mass production of the beef and the chickens and the food produce that we have, all of them are not necessarily grass-fed. The ones that aren't have hormones and estrogens pumped into their foodstuffs to make them big and bulky. And the same for cows. A lot of milk has estrogen elements in it as well. So we have to be very careful.
This is yet another reason for making sure you eat healthily as possible, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, if you can go organic as much as you possibly can. Don't eat anything in plastic, and just think what you might be eating in chemical terms, which will affect your hormones and affect how they behave. Hormones are like dominoes. You know, if they're not lined up completely in a row and you sort of click them, they're not going to go, they will go all over the place. And that's really what's happening to most of us today.
Right. Deborah, look, we've covered a lot of stuff. Now, if people are listening to this and want to find out more or whatever, how can they do that? Just for more information, does the NHS have a good website? Have you got a website?
I've got a website. I mean, the NHS are doing, God bless them, as much as they can at the moment, as are all of the GPs. My website is Deborah the Menopause Consultant. You can get me on Instagram and Facebook in the same way. It's Deborah the Menopause Consultant. And I'm more than happy to share my information with anybody who wants to know more, it's really important that we become fully informed about what we're putting into our bodies, because it enormously affects everything.
Yeah. And also GPs, your GP would be a good place to call as well.
Always try your GP. Always try GP for any information, especially to do with menopause and hormones and supplements and prescription medication. Start with them, see what you get. But I'd say to everyone, be prepared to consider that not one treatment is going to deal with everything. It's very much like cherry picking. You might have to have a patch, which is wonderful. You might have to have a different sort of supplement, wonderful. But ultimately, you're also going to have to look at your lifestyle and what you're eating and the supplements that you need to take to support your body through this transition period. So it's actually a complex period of time, but be prepared to be open-minded and take everything on board. When you have the information, you can make an informed decision. And that's the most important thing to know.
Okay. Deborah, thank you very much indeed for chatting. I think people are going to find that useful.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure to talk to you too. And good luck with yours and your wife's menopause.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to my guests on this week's show, and they were Clifton Flack of CiiTECH, talking about CBD products, and Deborah Forsyth, advisor to women during the menopause. And of course, thank you to you for listening. That was the Relax Back UK show with me, Mike Dill. Thank you for listening, and please do join us again next time.